All right, welcome everybody to the December 2022 Mayday Monday. It is December 2022, which I'm going to talk here about some line of duty desk stuff. We'll touch on, really this is going to be a big end of year wrap up for 2022 and hopefully get us kicking off for 2023. So like we've done for the last few Mayday Mondays since the last time we were together, I want to say the names of those firefighters who we have lost in the line of duty. Alex Moss of the Upper Saddle River Fire Department died of an apparent heart attack. Juan Wilson of the Baltimore City Fire Department suffered a medical emergency while on the scene of a medical emergency. Assistant Chief Jimmy Scanlon from Hopkins, Minnesota, died of a heart attack a day after responding to an automatic fire alarm. Everett Watson, a volunteer chief in Arkansas, suffered an apparent heart attack. Firefighter Johnny Tetrick of the Cleveland Division of Fire was struck and killed while operating at a collision scene. Basil Pizzuto, a volunteer with Saddlebrook, New Jersey, suffered a heart attack. Kurt Kyle Hoffer, a volunteer in Mapleton, Pennsylvania, was struck and killed while operating at a car crash. And then this morning, we're taping this on the December the 8th. This morning, we woke up to some horrible news out of Pennsylvania, out of Schuylkill County, where they had two firefighters were killed while fighting a fire, rescuing trapped occupants there. But the fire grew to such extent that Marvin Gruber and Assistant Chief Zachary Paris perished in that fire. Please take a moment and remember all of these firefighters, their families, and their departments as they mourn and recover from these tragedies. As of today, the USFA had logged 86 line of duty deaths, adding the two from Pennsylvania from this morning. It should be 88 firefighters have died in the line of duty so far in 2022. So with that, I want to get into this month's talk. I have with me today Jake Hoffman, a friend. I got introduced to Jake back when we both got involved in Underwriter Laboratories fire attack study. But I think there's a connection too with some like DC area. Jake came out of Bethesda, Chevy Chase, or Montgomery County area, but he's here. Since meeting him, I know that Jake got involved in some RIT training, was a big in that. And again, with Mayday Mondays, with the connection that we have, I wanted ask Jake to come on, talk a little bit about his vision of rapid intervention, where training should go, and he'll help me wrap up the 2022 Mayday Mondays. Jake, if you would take a few seconds here, or minute, or ever how long you need, introduce yourself to the podcast.
Oh, first of all, thanks for having me, Chief. So like you mentioned, originally from Montgomery County, Maryland. My dad was a volunteer down there for 30 years at the Chevy Chase Rescue Squad. So ever since I was a little kid, all I ever wanted to be was a fireman, and a fireman who rides a rescue squad. Like that's pretty much.
Yeah, you guys had it pretty easy there as far as fire goes, right? You just had to ride a rescue squad.
Yeah, like even growing up as a little kid, I mean, my dad didn't want me looking at ambulances or engines. It was always the rescue squad or nothing. And so we moved away while I was still in school. So I never was actually a member there. Got a bunch of friends. I go back and I would ride, especially when I was a volunteer up here in Ohio. I started as a junior member and explorer when I was in high school. Pretty much like the day that I turned 14, got involved in that, and then went from there. Volunteered at a couple departments outside of Toledo. Ended up getting hired by one of our suburbs. Worked there for a couple of years, and just over 10 years ago, was lucky enough to get hired in the city of Toledo, where I work now. For the last 6 or 7 years, I've had a bid to rescue Squad 7, one of our two squads in the city. Right now, I'm temporarily assigned to our Special Operations Bureau. So it's not the great 24/48 schedule. It's a Monday through Friday gig with a buggy, but we're responsible for all the training and logistics for all of our specialty programs, all the SOC programs. So I've been lucky to have a lot of good experiences on our job, but also be able to kind of travel around and teach some stuff. I was just down at the rest at BCC a couple weeks ago, helping out teach a rescue weekend down there. So it's always cool to be able to go back there. But I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at. I never really intended to be a RIT guy. I was always a firm believer that the basics will get you through. And I still believe that, but in a slightly different way. And basically after our line of duty deaths in 2014, when we lost Jamie Dickman and Steve Machinsky, which you talked to Battalion Chief Benham about previously, there was a lot of things that were eerily similar. When we started drilling down into the specifics of our line of duty deaths, and it kind of set me down the rabbit hole of how can we do RIT better.
Well, yeah. Speaking of shooting of a rabbit hole, we got you, to hopefully go down this one. But I think Toledo's recognized that they got a shooting star there, and Jake, and they've reined you in, put you on day work, and gonna get something out of you. Hopefully, get something out and help make the department better. So again. Yeah, I really thank you for being on here. If we would, let's quickly dissect this month's incident.
Sure.
This month's incident, if I'm going to share my screen here, if I can, let me get this up here. I have some technical problems, but we will work through this. This month's Mayday Monday, the one we're going to kind of highlight. Again, we don't have, this is this month's post that we see. This is who we're going to talk about. Jake, you mentioned that you, as soon as you could join the Explorers, you did that same thing. As soon as I could get into my junior fire department, I did the same thing. This month's memory, if you will, who we're going to kind of honor and think about, learn more about, Captain Jack Rose. Did that as well. He joined the fire department up there in Mount Marion, which is Saugerties, outside of upstate New York, if you will. He joined the volunteer fire department there at 16 years old, as soon as he could. In fact, what I'm reading about him is that he took the family, he made the family go out and chase the fire trucks before he was old enough to join. Right. He probably heard the siren and said, "Hey, let's go jump in the car and drive down, go chase what's going on." So he took these calls in. Again, one of these guys, we hear a lot of these guys who we've focused on and talked about in the Mayday Mondays were these, all into it kind of firefighters. And I'm sure, unfortunately, he was taken at such a young age, but he was, going to be gonna do good things for the fire service up there in New York. So Jack Rose, this month's Mayday Monday is dedicated in your memory, and we're gonna learn from what happened. Mount Marion Fire Department is where he was from. If you look here on the right, there's a map there. You can kind of get an idea of where the red dot there highlights where the incident was. Albany is north, and they're north of New York City. So they're, looks like they're almost about equidistant between New York City and Albany, maybe a little bit closer to Albany. But again, towns you might have heard of: Saugerties, Albany, Poughkeepsie. They were in that area. Sounds like rural place. They had looking at their page today and getting information. They have 30 members. They do about 150 runs a year. They protect 9 square miles of immediate town. In that 9 square miles, they have about 1,400 residents. Now they do, respond in mutual aid or outside of Mount Marion to help. And that's what was going on this day. They're led by Chief Glenn Jones. I did talk to Glenn Jones, kind of talk to him about us talking about this incident. He was not there at the incident. The chief that was involved is no longer around with Mount Marion. The president of the volunteer department is Josh Young. So that's where we are. That's where we are, in Woodstock, New York area. December 19th, 2015. The department, the Centerville Fire Department, and again, we just go back. We're getting this from the NIOSH report. We're getting this from NIOSH report. We're also getting this from firefighter close calls, information that I could kind of get off of the internet to find out about this incident. So on December 19th, 2015, about 7 o'clock in the evening, the Centerville Fire Department, which is closest, if you look here, were dispatched to 11 Felquay Road in the Saugerties Woodstock area for a chimney fire. They were dispatched for chimney fire. Centerville Fire Department, which is number 19, is dispatched first due, and 41, which is the Mount Marion, was dispatched as the RIT or fast team to come assist. At that time, there was a holiday event going on, and the company Mount Marion had a couple of fire trucks, couple of units at the holiday event. They had 6 firefighters that were there. So when the call came out, they got a jump on it. They had a unit they call 4120, Rescue 4120, and they had their engine 4110. 4120 was a pickup truck. Miscellaneous runs they take with that. But the 3 guys, Lieutenant, it was Lieutenant then, he got promoted to captain after the incident. Jack Rose, there was one of their assistant chiefs, and there was a 3rd member in the truck that was exterior only. So the call comes out, 4120, the pickup truck, the rescue, got there first. Quickly behind was the assistant chief, or the chief, I'm sorry, of the Centerville Fire Department, Company 19. So the 3 guys from Mount Marion are getting their gear on. The chief does his 360. He goes around the house and he finds fire in the area of this chimney. It's coming out of the on either side of the chimney, and 4120 with Jack and the assistant chief are getting their gear on. The engine from 19 shows up, 1910. It had 2 people on it, driver and a firefighter. When that pulls up, the crew from 4120 go grab SCBAs off of 1910, put the SCBAs on, and together with the member from 19, they form an attack crew. They make entry into this front porch. When they get in, they had obvious fire around the chimney. So while they're in there knocking down the fire, other units arrive on the scene. They get the fire knocked down, exit. The 3 of them exit. And there was one of the members, I think the member from 19 had a camera, fire cam. And the evidence from that shows that they were operating for about 14 and a half minutes inside, knocking the fire down. They come out. When they come out, a couple other members go in to overhaul. A couple members from a 3rd company go inside to overhaul. So while they're outside overhauling, they're like, hey, we need to go check the basement. Because if you look at the house here, you see it's 1 story. And then on the Delta corner, there's a basement entrance. The other companies are there. Yeah, go check the basement. The chief from Mount Marion goes down with Jack. They go in, they knock open the door, they go check the basement. They had smoke inside. Like, we need to go get a line. They go back outside, they grab a hand line, and together with a couple other members, they make entry into that basement. At this time, they had a pretty good fire going in the basement. It sounds like the basement fire was primarily over in this Charlie quadrant of the basement. As they're making an attack, the assistant chief from Mount Marion thought Jack was on the line with them. As they're making the attack, he realizes Jack's not there. He calls out to Jack. There's no answer. The other members from the other company, they start to look around and they're yelling for Jack. At that time, a Mayday call is issued for Jack being missing. RIT team comes in, or fast team comes in. They do a search. They locate Jack on the floor. He's on his knees, in obvious distress. The chief says, hey, Jack, are you okay? And he's like, no, I'm not okay. As they're taking him out, he goes unresponsive, and they couldn't bring him back. We transport him to the hospital, and cause of death was asphyxia due to inhalation of heated products of combustion. So while they're doing the investigation, right after the investigation, they learn that when he grabbed that air pack off the truck, it was different than the air pack that he uses at Mount Marion. Centerville and Mount Marion had different air packs. So in addition, he's normally wears a large face piece at Mount Marion. Well, grabbing the air pack off of Centerville, he grabbed a medium face piece, or a small, and large and medium. Yeah, large and a medium face piece. So did that contribute to him inhaling the gases? We don't know. We do know that when they took him to the hospital, they found some burns around his forehead. Again, could that have happened as they were taking him out and his face piece got knocked off? It possibly could be, but unfortunately, the SCBA that he was wearing wasn't part of the investigation. So there's some of these questions that we don't know, right? We don't have answers to. But this is the rig, that's the rescue. In fact, that's their current rescue at Mount Marion. This one I think they got after the fire, because that's at 2016 and the fire was in 2015. So some questions out there. And I did talk to the chief that they have now and asked him about any kind of, after this, what kind of recovery that was their training that they emphasized. And really, he said that they did kind of ramp up their SCBA training there. Jack again was a lieutenant. He was promoted to captain after this incident, and as he died for the fire from this incident, from this injuries here. So he did finish as a captain with the Mount Marion Fire Department. Jake, what do you think? Tough one there.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously it's a pretty small house, and a lot of times that's deceiving. Again, I can just relate it back to our line of duty deaths, where the building on Magnolia Street was not very large, and we had 2 guys killed inside of that. So I think a lot of times, and of course not saying that's what happened here, but I think a lot of times it's easy to take something smaller like this and kind of get complacent. Like it's a single story, it's a little walkout basement. There's nothing to it. We just go in this exterior door to the basement and treat it like a first floor, and we'll be good. But I don't know. I mean, it sounds like they were doing the right thing, checking the basement, right? I mean, how many times does that get us in trouble? Operating above a basement fire, obviously, as you guys know all too well down in DC. But yeah, I mean, it's just tough that without having the SCBA to investigate and get some of that, like you said, there's just questions that we may never get the answer to.
Yes. So please, everybody out there, go out and look up this report. This is the NIOSH report. Here's one of the recommendations from the NIOSH report. And I mean, a lot of these times we read these things and it's like, no duh, right? It's like, yeah, of course we should. But this recommendation number 5, fire departments should ensure that firefighters are properly trained with the specific SCBA that they are using, and also in SCBA repetitive skills training and out of air SCBA emergencies. That sounds like a Mayday Monday. So again, just thinking about that, right? Thinking about those SCBA repetitive skills. Jake, do you have a favorite SCBA drill you would run your guys through?
I mean, so I think one of my favorites to do when it comes to that is it's pretty easy to do, because not everybody's always got a training building, right? Like in the city, we try to train in vacants whenever we can, but we don't have a drill tower in every engine house. And so one of the things that either every firehouse has or every park in your first due area has is a picnic table of some sort. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll have a piece of drain tile, right? Like some corrugated pipe, and we'll put that thing to basically just ratchet strap it to the side bench of the picnic table. And it's amazing how many just personal self SCBA competence skills and drills you can do in that setup. And then obviously, if you wanted to expand it kind of into a more of a RIT role, how much it complicates matters when you have to access a member who's basically underneath that picnic table, do a face piece changeover or transfill, or just grab them and drag them back out. And it's amazing how just a simple picnic table and a piece of tube can throw things off. But another thing that I know you and I had mentioned, and it's in the notes, is, I mean, the one thing that every firehouse has in America is a truck of some sort, right? So if all you can do is crawl underneath the truck and do some of these skills, it's in a tighter environment. It'll obviously make things a little bit more complicated than just searching around the apparatus floor in a wide open area.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we all would love to have a trailer with a drop down floor and reduced profile and small areas. We would love to have that, but I mean, we know that we don't necessarily have that. This is some stuff that I did. Again, this is you've seen that Fireground Survival, the IAFF Fireground Survival, and they've gone to great lengths to build these props. And this is a really nice entanglement prop that they've done, and then they have that reduced profile wall. And if you've looked into that thing, you know the cost with those. But you don't have to do that, right? You can get, if you look at the picture here, this is from one of the fire departments that I found online. They have a couple 2x4 frame, it looks like, and they're just crawling through that, right? And even if you just hold the door open a little bit while a firefighter comes up and give them a reduced profile. It doesn't take much to get to work on the SCBA confidence, right? Again, Mayday Mondays, one of my favorite ones is the shake and bake drill. And we got this. The shake and bake came from we did back in the 80s and 90s. We did this confined space class where one of the drills was you would have like 30 people in class, and you would take all their SCBAs and pile them up into a big pile, and you had to crawl in there and find it and pull it out. And it was just SCBA confidence. Well, adapt that to firefighter survival when it's not confined space stuff, but it's firefighter survival. And we can do a shake and bake with, 4 people. The good one I like is you get 4 cylinders and 2 of them are empty and 2 of them are full, or maybe you have them all at low air alarms going off. And then, now I've really kind of working on stress, right? Work on that stress thing and ramp it up. So it doesn't take a lot to work on this, but everybody needs to do some kind of SCBA confidence. Again, corrugated pipe, like Jake's talking about. I mean, he ratcheted it to a picnic table. Hopefully, it didn't interrupt anybody having a picnic or anything. But it doesn't take much to do this. And while you're working on entanglement, you're really working on SCBA, right? Because you learn to know where all the parts and pieces of that SCBA are, and to work it through.
Real quick, Tony, just like if people want some of these ideas, I'll say in my travels, probably the single greatest SCBA confidence maze, trailer, drills, whatever you want to call it, is in Kearney, Nebraska. And if you look it up, the guy who kind of designed this, his name's Walt. He wrote an article for Fire Engineering, and I think it's on the website. I know that. And there's schematics and everything. It talks about all the different pieces and parts that they have. And I mean, we've taught up there a couple times, and that confidence course is second to none that I've seen. And I actually got the blueprints from him through the article. And we've actually tried to replicate it in some of the vacants that we get to train in every summer, because it's fantastic stuff. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, no, right. That's what we're all about, right? Is not reinventing and taking stuff that other people do that for us. And yeah, so get that stuff to us, and we'll get that out. We'll get a link out, or maybe find that article, and Pete can link it to the Mayday Monday. So again, SCBA confidence, right? A very, very, really a basic skill, but one we want to add to. So look at these. This is our 2022. This is a list of all the things that we did since last December. Last month, RIT deployment, right? And if you remember RIT deployment, that was where we were talking to firefighters that were rescued by the RIT in Dallas, Texas. a good podcast there. We talked to the captain who called the Mayday, or I guess she was a lieutenant who was involved in the Mayday, and then her rescuer, the USAR guys there in Dallas with a great operation. October was Know Your Buildings. That was we looked at a collapse. If you remember the collapse that was in Ohio, right? No, it was in Kansas City, Kansas, Missouri, right? They had a collapse of a burning building, and the building they had gone to a lot. It was a ordinary / there was some balloon frame in there. So that month, I implored you, please get out, do a walk of your main street or someplace and look at your buildings. September, firefighter escape. If you remember, that was a great rescue / escape, right? The firefighters were in a position that they had to get out, but there was an occupant inside that bedroom. Clackamas, Oregon. Great story, great video there from those talking to those members. And that month we looked at our firefighter escape setup. What do you have? Do you have a rope system? Do you have a personal escape system? If you don't have that, go out and practice your ladder escape. Go out and practice your window hang. Look at firefighter escape. August was a vertical vent that we were looking at. Lieutenant Todd Crodel from Dallas. Horrible incident there where he fell through a fire weakened roof and was not able to survive again. So that was emphasizing the basics of vertical vent, right? There's a lot of people out there that don't do vertical vent, but there's going to be a time where they may get called to it. So make sure you look at your vertical vent SOGs. Do you have the right equipment? And then of course training. July, there you go, shake and bake. July, we talked to Clyde Gordon from Houston, Texas, and we learned about Danny Groover, who passed away on a fire, a very like bread and butter fire for them. But it sounds like maybe there was a lack of emphasis in his tenure on firefighting skills. So that got us back to that SCBA confidence stuff, the shake and bake drill. June, we talk about Charleston. Remember, we talked to a couple of chiefs from Charleston that had retired. One of them had moved on to another department in South Carolina. Again, that was the Charleston 9, big fire, big water, and get out and practice your big hose line movement. May of this year, we talked to New Haven. We talked about the New Haven Fire Department. They had an out of air emergency. And we'll look at a drill later on. One of the videos that Jake's brought with him. We'll talk about some out of air emergency stuff. April was one close to me. Was again 2 miles from my house. Kyle Wilson, Prince William County, Virginia, and calling the Mayday. Kyle gave a really good Mayday call at that fire. Unfortunately, conditions were such they couldn't get to him in time. March, we talked to Chief from Boston. If you guys look at that podcast, Steve was really bearing it all, right? And some really good take home use, especially if you're in a command position. The chiefs out there, that was a great one for you to watch. And it talks about the skill drill that month was to practice your emergency evacuation. Again, right, emergency evacuation, nobody plans to evacuate, right? Nobody goes to a fire to say, we're going to evacuate. So that the problem is we don't practice that. So then it becomes, oh no, it's time to evacuate. How do we do this? We haven't practiced it before. So that was that month to work on practicing that. February, that's Heart Health Month, not just for the fire service, but the America, right? American Heart Association pushes the heart health. And we looked at heart health. We talked to Randy Feltner of a federal fire department here outside of Washington, D.C. And we talk about his close call. He presumably healthy guy, goes to work, is getting ready to go to the gym, and he has a heart attack and dies. Fortunately, he was at work and got what he needed. And Randy's there as a survivor to talk about it. Back in January, we talked to to Philly. We talked to Devin Riccio from Philadelphia Fire Department, who was on the fire that killed Matt Letourneau. Matt, a friend of ISFSI, a friend of UL. Again, another, like, I don't want to say like Jake, but like Jake, he was a shooting star in his department, and died in a horrible building collapse there. We talked about building concerns. Think about Jacob Johnson is he from Toronto or Vancouver? He's a Canadian firefighter who talks big about building construction, and he gave us a way to look at the building as opposed to kind of that whole, big size up and the different building constructions. There's other things that need to look at: age, the size, the use those things to kind of do your size up of the building. And then last December, we talked to firefighters from Worcester about their firefighter, Chris Roy, who died in a apartment building, in a situation much like we saw Mark Langbart in Denver, a small window. He's died right inside of a window, and a neighboring fire department responded in, and they used that high ladder rope. Jake, you seen that? You played with the high ladder stuff. I'm sure you did the basic firefighter 2, where you laced the rope over, right, and tied the rescue knot. Remember the rescue knot?
Oh yeah.
So remember last month we looked at that. We looked at the Anderson rescue system. Please go back and look at these things. One thing you're going to notice here is all of these things are very, very basic, right? They're all about basics. Anything that there, Jake, that jumps out at you is like firefighting 201 or like an advanced firefighting class?
Not really. I mean, maybe just some different approaches. So it's not that anything's the basics or anything's any further along, I guess, than the basics, or more advanced than the basics. It just sometimes, I guess, requires a different vantage point of the basics, I guess, because how many of us are taught the one way to do it, that our department's always done it, or that the instructor who happened to teach you, name the topic, whether it's RIT or it's vertical ventilation or it's SCBAs, in the academy or in your firefighter 1 and 2 class, how often is that really what's drilled into you and what you always just understood to be the right thing to do? And sometimes you just need to get your eyes open to that there's maybe more than one way to do the basics. And so, yeah, I don't think anything's super advanced in that list.
So with that, to kind of build on that, the basics of Mayday Monday's basics can kind of be summed up into into my big five here, right? And if you look at what we've talked about over the last, this has been going on now for 7-8 years. We've been doing Mayday Mondays. Fitness, right? If you're not fit, physically fit, mentally fit, all that kind of stuff. If you're not fit, right, then you can't even do the rest of those things. So you have to be fit, right? If you're not in shape, again, now I know you're saying rounds of shape, but you need to be in fire fit shape. It doesn't take, the membership at a gym, doesn't take that. It takes just getting out and doing something, whether it's walking, whether it's, you see there, we played basketball, right? That was pretty fun. It hurt afterwards. You realize muscles you didn't use before, but it was good. Plus it not only did it emphasize fitness, but it emphasized SCBA confidence. Fitness, right? Fitness. The other one is gear. One of the basics, gear. If you know how to put your gear on, get it on correctly, whether it's the turnout gear, whether it's your SCBA, all those parts. Gear has been designed for us to get in. It allows us to go places that we probably shouldn't go, but allows us to go places if we know how to use it, know how to wear it, put it on right. The other things, water, right, or engine work, truck or support work, and RIT and survival. Those are the big fives that you'll see in the basics that we talk about with Mayday Monday. Again, last year with those 12 different months, we covered something in that: fitness, gear, engine, water, truck, support, RIT, survival. All those things were covered in there. Those are the big five that we want to talk about, and hopefully we'll focus on those as we go forward in 2023. Speaking of the big five, Jake, I know you got a big five, right?
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
So this comes kind of like everything that I've kind of gotten my feet into with RIT. Comes out of lessons that we learned. on January 26th, 2014 at 528 Magnolia Street with our double line of duty death. And we realized that far too often guys they're pretty much dumping everything but the kitchen sink out of the truck company or the rescue squad, throwing it all in a Stokes basket and just dragging it up to the front and standing there, right? And we had way too much stuff. It took way too long to get crews into position, and there was no way that you were going to actually be able to deploy with all that stuff. So this was actually spearheaded by Lieutenant Ron Kay, who had just recently retired as one of our safety officers, but he was the officer on Squad 7 that day on Magnolia Street, a huge mentor of mine. And he really kind of took the lead on trying to streamline just the basic equipment cache that we needed so that RIT could get set up quickly at a fire. And really, this is what it got boiled down to, was the RIT pack with a face piece, a thermal imaging camera, a rope bag, a set of irons, and a hose line. And so the irons are there just kind of as a reminder, right? I mean, anybody that's operating on the fire ground, I mean, there's always a bunch of guys running around with Halligans and hooks and Halligans and flatheads and everything. That's just to remind you that you're going to need personal tools. The hose line, there's kind of an asterisk on that. For us, we'll always pull a RIT line, and it usually doesn't get charged until, if we deploy, we know which way we have to go, where we're going to make entry, or even if you don't need it, we won't bring it with us to slow us down, because we don't have the luxury in Toledo of having like an entire rapid intervention group on the fire ground. We'll have just an engine company is going to be that RIT team, and then if a Mayday is called, then it'll be expanded. So we kind of had to prioritize on what can we get off the rig quick, and how can we get up there, size up the building, do any softening or any proactive RIT operations that we need to do, while still bringing enough stuff to supplement the crews that are already inside, that are more than likely, if you look at Project Mayday, already making contact with that down firefighter. So that's why the RIT pack's the first thing that we bring up, just because that's the one thing we bring that the other interior crews may not be able to provide, depending on if you have buddy breathing systems or anything like that. But really, all we can do is bring air and or water to provide time to that down firefighter. So that's really kind of what we focused on, is locating them and getting them air. Everything else we can deal with as it comes. You're on mute, Tony.
Yeah, I'm with you. I definitely see, you see these guys, they load everything up into a Stokes basket, and then, it takes them, by the time they get there, they need rehab or something. I distinctly remember I was a fire in DC, and it was turning out to be not much of a fire. And we send at that time we sent a fifth engine, and then the first due truck on the working fire dispatch they get together to form that RIT. And the fire was getting knocked down, but the chief said, "Hey, truck so and so, you're going to be the RIT." So things are winding down, and like I think the chief is waiting. He's like, "Truck so and so, are you getting that stuff up here?" And I go, "You really want us to take all that stuff up there?" So again, not that that's, I mean, if you're supposed to, you're supposed to, but we definitely can streamline, right? And I think that you came out with this several years ago.
Yep.
And I think now, right now that we're looking at that Project Mayday, and we look at all the stuff we're learning about what's going on with our real Maydays, what's going on? They're running out of air, or they're lost in the building. So do we need, the battering ram? Do we need the metal cutting saw and the wood cutting saw? I think, do we need that tarp to shut everything up?
Oh my God.
No, we need.
There's my trigger word. The RIT tarp is like, oh my God. Like one of my favorite things to say when I'm talking RIT is just avoid the RIT picnic, right? Like, you don't need to bring your wicker basket and your RIT tarp to lay everything out and have it stenciled and labeled. And like, if you're setting up a tarp for RIT, you have too much stuff off the rig, in my opinion. And you bring up a good point that what are the Maydays that we're going to, and how can we be the most help to the most people. And so that's kind of why we stress the big five. Not to say that you'll never need a metal cutting saw, not to say that you won't need airbags, that you won't need a sawzall, all this other stuff. I mean, right? You look at whether it was Matt Latorno in Philly, or the tragedy in Baltimore City where they had the 3 firefighters killed earlier this year. The report just came out, and you see how intense those rescue operations were. But the vast majority of the Maydays that we looked at when we were trying to revamp how we did RIT, we categorized everything into either simple or complex Maydays. And the simple Maydays, they weren't any less dangerous or any less deadly. They just didn't require anything past the big five really to fix, or what interior crews already have. They were relatively easily remedied if you had the people and basically could get those people to the member. The complex Maydays were about 10 or 15% of what we looked at, both internally and externally. And that was your larger scale events where there's a collapse or somebody's seriously entangled, and it's going to be a longer duration incident. And again, so I don't say simple and complex to make one any deadlier or any more important than the other, but that's really how we justified switching to this more streamlined RIT deployment, with more of a try to focus on flexibility and rapid response. Like how can we get there and set up RIT quick and be effective and efficient as we try to be proactive in preventing a Mayday, but also how can we rapidly respond if a Mayday is called, rather than taking umpteen minutes out in the front yard to get our bearings and come up with a plan.
Yeah. I think not to, again, the RIT, right, definitely has a place. One thing I've been kind of examining now is that idea about on deck. And you talked a little bit about that. I mean, and I think that just kind of shows. I like the idea with they talk about this 3 deep, right? So you have the on deck, you have the RIT, and then you have staging back. So it's all about having the people available to do this.
Sure. And I don't know, I'm not personally a big fan of, at your average house fire, or probably any fire, but especially the average house fire, rotating crews through the RIT role, unless it's really prolonged and you're having trouble getting relief crews maybe, or something like that. But for us, I think there's a lot to be lost in translation when one company gets there and starts and sets up RIT, and that's their mentality the whole fire. And then you just rotate another crew in, and then that crew, that initial RIT crew, is now they're going to be overhaul on Division 2 or whatever the assignment is. And so I don't have a whole lot of firsthand experience with an on deck type system, but it just seems like the way that it works for us, I feel like that would just throw everything into disarray, at least at my department, with the way that we operate.
No, I get it. No, it's good. It's good. It's definitely, I think the streamlined part is important, right? Because that's what you're showing. You're showing that you're paying attention to what's gone before, what's happened before too, right?
Yeah,
we're not just, not just checking the box of RIT. No, we're actually paying attention, and we're gonna streamline it, and we're gonna give it the equipment it needs, and hopefully, right, because it is streamlined, the crew that's getting the RIT assignment will take it seriously too. So they don't have to say, oh, we got to load up this big thing and carry it down there and just carry it right back. No, that they should know that this is air, water, right?
And I think, I know we're going to talk about it coming up here, but the way that we stage our RIT team and how they could deploy after a Mayday, I think that has a lot to do with it as well, because the way that we kind of stage, and I know you've got the diagram in there, but that basically affords us a continuous 360 of the structure. So if we just swap these guys out willy-nilly with whatever crew comes in, they don't have that prior knowledge of what it looked like 5 minutes ago. And is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is that wall or that chimney leaning out more than it was before? Like all those little things that the chief might notice if they take a lap, or the safety officer might notice if they take a lap every so often. But RITs, basically, they're like a security camera. They're always on. They're always on all the corners. And really able to kind of monitor long term, I guess, throughout the challenging part of the incident.
Yeah, no, I get it, and that you touched on this. I talked to Chief Benedum back in January of 2021. That was the your Magnolia Street fire was anniversary is in January. So that month we hooked up with Mike. He gave me a great interview and some really good insight onto the incident. And also we talked about the recovery and how Toledo rallied around that and learn from that to increase the capabilities or become a more aggressive fire department, right? So one of the things, again, that was found in that report was communication was an issue on the fire ground. So we highlighted communication by doing the Lego thing. I don't know if you've done that before, but as simple, the guys are like, why are you bringing in Legos? But then they do it and they realize how important it is, right? And especially if you get into where my role was being out in the command post and you have to be able to decipher some of these communications, it's important, right? So with that, Machinsky, Dickman, again, sounds like some good guys that were going to do good stuff for your fire department there. Taken too soon. Did this this is what launched you down the RIT rabbit hole?
Yep. Yeah. So for me personally, in our department as a whole, but especially for me personally, like I said, I never like set out to be a RIT guy. I just like going fires and doing the rescue thing. But then I was working on January 26th. I was at Engine 16. We were across the city and we were listening to the fire. And as soon as the Mayday popped off, we got dressed. I ran in and got the captain was in his office. I said, "Hey, Cap, there's a Mayday over on Magnolia in Freeze District. We're gonna be on the second alarm." Like, so he runs out, gets dressed, and the tones go off. We open the door. We're pulling out on the approach, and they're actually sending us on a shooting like 6 blocks away rather than the fire. And so we had to listen to the whole thing. We didn't get to the scene till after we had helped the medic unit to the hospital with the shooting victim. And so in talking to a lot of the guys that were there that are legends on our job, I mean, just fantastic firefighters that I really admire and respect, guys that have been in the inner city their entire career, were mentors of mine, and how they just felt helpless. They felt like they didn't do enough. They couldn't do enough. They wanted to know why what they did wasn't good enough, and would it have made a difference? And obviously, if you read the report, I mean, nothing that we would have done would have made a difference, but we really wanted to see what we could learn from it. And so when we started comparing some of the incident times and how that timeline played out as far as on scene and RIT being established and the Mayday occurring and where RIT was positioned, how long it took to get Jamie out, how long it took to get Steve out. There was a lot of eerie similarities when we looked at what Phoenix had found after the Brett Tarver fire and when they did their studies. And then same thing with Asheville, North Carolina. Those are two of the big ones that we looked at, the drills they did in the report that they released after Jeff Bowen was killed. And we realized that even though we're not going to supermarket fires and 5 or 6 story office building fires in Toledo every day, there was a lot more similarities in timing and in personnel and everything than we had previously thought. I mean, we were kind of ignorance is bliss, I guess. I don't think we were overly cocky. We just thought, like, if we go to a grocery store fire, we'll definitely think about that. But we're going to small house fires 3 or 4 a day sometimes. I mean, it's the bread and butter, if you like that term. And so that's kind of just what's setting us down this road. And I think it's helped. There was just a Mayday in the city probably 6 days ago, 5 or 6 days ago. Young firefighter, she just got off probation, I guess. I heard the story secondhand from a buddy of mine who was actually the RIT officer on the scene, but was taking the stairs to the second floor. It was a 2-story house, but it was on I guess where the stairs were at, they were on a crawl rather than basement. And I guess the stairs were burnt out from Division 1 to Division 2. So she'd fallen through the stairs. She was the last one kind of in the stack of her engine company going upstairs. So it took a minute before anybody realized she was missing. And she was basically letting herself out the side door on Division 1 as her officer was calling the Mayday, probably about 20 seconds after she fell through, 20, 30 seconds after she fell through the floor. And my buddy Mike was able to clear the Mayday right away because he had her. And again, all stuff that would not have happened before January 26, 2014. I mean, had we not had that incident, RIT wouldn't have been staged where they were. Mike wouldn't have seen her right away. We just started dumping crews in. I mean, obviously things start to escalate really quickly, and we've had other Maydays since then where it's paid dividends in getting people inside, out, and coordinating with the interior crews that are already in there. So it's really been huge for us. I think it's helped us out a lot.
So no, and that's awesome to see that the lessons that were learned, you know, are being applied, and they're beneficial. Here's one, right? I think you told me that everybody is issued this webbing.
Sure. So on our job, basically, if you come up with a good idea and convince the department to do it, it gets named after you. So a guy who's another huge mentor of mine, he's a battalion chief now. His name's Matt Brixey, and he came up with this idea to carry webbing in this configuration. He'd always done it for years himself. He convinced the city to do the same and issue it to everybody on the job. So we just call it a Brixey bundle, because like I said, if you come up with something, it generally gets named after you. So it's just a large aluminum carabiner, 20 or 25-foot piece of webbing, tied, as you see there, with a loop on each end. One end smaller just fits the carabiner, the other end's bigger if you need to fit your hand into it or what have you. And there's like 1,000,001 ways to use this. Everybody keeps it. Most people keep it rolled up in an EMS glove like that in their pocket so it doesn't unravel. And I was a guy that always carried webbing, but it was always daisy chained, and every time you went to pull it out, you pulled on the wrong loop or whatever else. And this is easy. You grip it and rip it, and you pull it right out of the EMS glove, and you can click it into a giant loop. You can make a harness with it. You can drag with it. You can, since it's 20 or 25 feet long, I mean, you can drop it down from an upper floor and do a rope stretch basically without even having to remember to bring a rope bag if you weren't planning on it. We train on doing a bottle wrap bailout with that from a second floor window, because the department doesn't issue us any bailout equipment. Now, I'm a firm believer that a couple $100 on bailout equipment that's probably going to last you most of your career is pretty good insurance. So I'm a firm believer in buying your own stuff when it comes to that. But for a lot of guys on our job, that this is the only bailout equipment that they've got. So it gives us a lot of options, but also for RIT, we can use this to effect a below grade rescue of a firefighter through a floor as interior crews. We don't have to wait for RIT to bring in a rope bag or bring in whatever kit you have. If you get 3 or 4 guys, they can pull their bundle out of their pocket, and you can even lower a firefighter down if the Mayday firefighter's unconscious. He can disconnect and hook the guy up, or if the guy's conscious, you can just lower these down to him, and he can clip himself in, and you can have the rescue or the extrication done maybe even before RIT has made it to the scene. So it gives us a lot of really good options. It's definitely, I think, a utilized tool on our job. I mean, now that everybody's got it and people see that there are some applications. Now, don't get me wrong, I've still never used my webbing to pull somebody out. I don't know many people that have ever actually used the webbing for that. It's always just gripping them and rip them. But as far as all the
about that, because
Sure.
you mentioned that when in leading up to this is you know, a lot of us are depending on the SCBA to move that down firefighter.
Yep.
And now we have the drag rescue device, but one of the tough things I think about that is it's tough to find. Right, it's right there at the base, right there by the top of the bottle. It can be tough to get that, and I think a lot of people forget about it. Obviously, this is something, this webbing, you can use that quick. You can use this webbing. Everybody's got it.
Yep.
You can pull it out and do a wrap or something.
Yeah, I think, and so like the picture up there on the upper left, that I believe that's Steve Machinsky's SCBA. That was during the murder trial for the arsonist that lit the fire that killed Jamie and Steve. And just to kind of show you the heat and what they were dealing with, and you talk to the guys who were on RIT, he was proned out. So they found his bottle. They felt that, and what do? I mean, you kind of use that as a handle to roll the guy off or roll the guy over. And they said even though it was completely pitch black conditions, that entire bottle came off in their hands because the straps had burned through, the hoses had burned through. And talking to Pat, the guy who did this, he said even though he still couldn't see, he just instinctually like held it up in front of his face, just like, did that really happen? How am I holding the harness of this SCBA in my hands right now? And so I think that's important to realize, that if everything you know about moving a down firefighter hinges solely on using the SCBA, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. And if somebody would have asked me before Magnolia Street, if what I thought about the DRD, I'd probably just said it's something that gets put in your gear. They can jack the price up. I mean, it's not super useful. Now I would argue the opposite. I would say that I think it's imperative that we have it in there, because it is an option, and you can't always depend on it, because like you said, you've said before, as gear gets sent out to get cleaned, it might not be reinstalled right. Guys don't like to use it in training just because they have to reset it, right? Like firefighters are lazy. And for us, we're lucky that every firehouse in the city has an extractor, and everybody's issued at least 2 sets of gear. So we're really, really good about washing our gear as soon as we get back from a fire. However, especially if you're in a busier company and you're rotating your sets of gear a lot, it's super easy to forget to put that DRD back in, or to install it correctly.
Yeah.
So there are pros and cons to it, but I think I do think it's a valuable tool, because why would we limit ourselves when the SCBA may or may not be present and functional, I guess, as a harness.
Yeah. And I think that we focus on the, we've been doing for years, where you disconnect the belly buckle and you reconnect it, and it's so hard, right? It's so hard. It adds so much time to the rescue, where you can get to the drag rescue device, or So no, I agree. That's good stuff. It's good lessons learned. Let's talk about this. This is a schematic you sent me. Is this something that's written in your books?
So our newest update procedure, yes, is going to have this in it. The current SOP we have for RIT was done up in pretty quickly after Magnolia to like rapidly implement some of the stuff that we had learned. And then also on our job, our procedures they're not super prescriptive. There's a lot of flexibility given to company officers, and even battalion chiefs, how they want their battalion to run, and then company officers, how their company runs. And so these are like suggestions in there. And this came out of Magnolia Street, when the engine boss on engine 17, who was who was dispatched as RIT, he realized it was a larger building than a normal house, and it was kind of irregular. You couldn't get around to the Charlie side along the Bravo. You couldn't get to the rear from the Bravo side. I'm sorry. You had to kind of go around the corner store that this thing was attached to, and then you had to book it back up the alley to get to the access on side Charlie, which is where the Division 2 access was. And so he just said, this place looks awfully weird. If something happens, like, it's going to take us forever to get there. So the officer and the probationary firefighter stayed up front, and he sent the driver and the senior man around to the rear, just in case something was to happen. And when the Mayday was called, they were split up like that. The guys in the rear, they masked up and went in almost immediately. And then when you look at the times and the tapes for that incident, it says it was like 4 minutes or however many minutes it was before RIT entered. And that was the time it took the officer and the probationary to walk around the building. And then the chief talked to him for a quick second and they went in. So realistically, the time from the Mayday to those first 2 RIT members going inside the side Delta door to Division 2 was probably less than 60 seconds. And afterwards, as we were kind of debriefing that, and guys were sharing what they did and what worked and what didn't work, this was one thing that stuck out. Like, where's this been our whole lives? Well, we don't need 4 shepherds standing out front leaning on their hooks, or just talking in the front yard, when we can put people at opposite corners, that 2x2 over there on the left. So you got 2 spots with 2 guys each, and then the other ones we just call the 4x1. So you got 1 guy at each corner. And it just kind of gives you that continuous 360, like I kind of alluded to earlier, that we can monitor building conditions. You might see somebody bust out a window or launch a window that needs help, or if we got to roll a ladder real quick to somebody that's cut off by fire. We had a fire a couple of years ago where the nozzleman had lost his portable, kept it in his bunker coat pocket, radio pocket, had lost his portable as they had a window fail in the real windy day. He's making his way up to the top of the stairs. Fire's blowing across in the hallway landing there. Window fails and ends up blowing him and his backup man down the stairs. His radio gets ejected out of his pocket. So just grabs the line, doesn't realize what happened, fights his way back upstairs, and they end up getting cut off. He's in a bathroom and realizes he doesn't have a radio, can't communicate, and ends up just taking his helmet off and punching it through a window. And luckily there was a guy back on the Charlie Delta corner who realized, like, I don't know, it's generally not a good sign when somebody takes their helmet off and punches it through a window. Just rolled the ladder over there and made contact with this guy, and they got things situated. And it was just so many little things like that where nobody got seriously hurt. Nobody got hurt at all at that one. I mean, they got lucky. But there was so many, I don't even know if I want to say close calls, but incidents like that where just having somebody close by made all the difference. And maybe that's why we didn't end up having another funeral or somebody gets seriously hurt. So I'm a huge believer in splitting up RIT in this instance. And obviously this isn't going to work for a warehouse fire or a garden apartment fire. This is what we do for our just run of the mill single family dwelling or duplex fire. And it seems to work really well for us.
No, again, more lessons learned, and you're applying it to actual stuff. Here's a video. You guys, I know you had said that since Magnolia Street, you guys, I guess it sounds like you have a good share of vacants. You find a vacant, and you take it over and run some RIT deployment drills in it.
Yeah, so we do a bunch of drills of vacants. There's no shortage of them in the city, that's for sure. But so this was a couple years ago, right after Magnolia. The first summer following that was a like RIT skill development, kind of reestablish everyone's baseline, and then it went to full speed RIT scenarios, which is what's going on here. So there's some, obviously this is just fire footage that our PMO had, but there's the radio traffic that's going on is all simulated as part of this drill. And there's a guy in here, he's lost, he's low on air. And so this was purely a RIT deployment. It didn't have anything to do with other interior crews for this particular drill. But it just shows the incident commander talking the guy through his Mayday. These guys come up, they do the RIT thing, right? They're cutting window bars, they're diving in, they're bringing their stuff. And it shows just talks about the chief's talking the firefighter through his out of air or low air emergency. And just a good example of how things have improved for us over the years.
Yeah, I cut them. Play some of the audio here.
Keep your face on the floor and breathe through your gloves. Do you copy? That sounds good. I'm saying I got a train for side alpha. Every side alpha. Call up to the firefighter, see if you can hear him answer.
Yeah, definitely added some stress, I'm sure, to the drill there, and the incident commander made good connection with the Mayday firefighter, gave him some good commands. I think that also kind of goes back to other Mayday classes that are out there. I think about the grab lives in the IAFF thing, right? Fire ground survival, where I don't know that I would want to use it to be the guy in trouble, but definitely if I'm the incident commander, it's a good way to think about calming that firefighter down, hopefully getting control of him, giving him some life-saving skills that he can do, and then sending in our RIT team. That gets everybody in the job gets rotated through that.
Yeah, so like I said, it started off with some basic skill development, and then it went to this. This was maybe 2 or 3 years after Magnolia. And then the last couple of years, what we've been doing is it's like a full alarm assignment drill. So like our training staff, and then typically like our shift safety officers, and then there's a staff safety officer who's kind of like the chief of safety. He's a lieutenant, but he's in charge of the safety bureau. They'll set up a drill in a vacant, and they'll dispatch so many crews to it. You'll respond, you'll start operating as you would, you'll be getting assignments, and then there's one of, I don't know, any number of Mayday scenarios will pop up. And so it's really to see how the interior crews react, how the RIT team reacts, and how they interact together. And it's been great. I know the last was it last summer? I think it was. Typically, our fire chief and like all of our administrative chiefs are usually one of the first engine companies to go through. So rather than the chiefs showing up in their black Tahoes and standing back and watching everybody work, most of the time they're the first crew that goes through the evolution. So yeah, it's everybody top to bottom in the whole department will get rotated through those drills.
Nice. So it sounds like you've even expanded it to include interior crews reaction to a Mayday.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so much like a lot of us across the country, right? Like everybody was led to believe like rah, RIT was going to be there to save the day. But like we said before, I mean, Project Mayday says it's the interior crews that are already going to be there. So when we started changing our RIT mentality, we said, look, nobody's saying that RIT is like Navy SEALs that are going to come in and do some crazy superhero stuff that nobody else can do. We're more like the cavalry. Like we're just there to back you up. When RIT gets deployed, they're going to get there and supplement the work that's already being done. And whether that's providing air or that's just providing some relief because these guys are gassed, or maybe they get the guy into a room, can isolate him, and all RIT's got to do is throw a ladder to that window if it's unladdered, or roll one over from another one. Coordination with them, and rather than just kind of operating in your own silo is huge. And I think that those drills went a long way in improving that for us.
No, I agree. Early on, right, we just kind of did a RIT drill where the RIT team made access, did their thing, like there's nobody else there.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I get it, because they kind of said, we've all thought, let's have them change channels. The firefighting crew will be on this channel and the RIT will be on this one. Like they're operating independent of each other.
Yeah.
So and the Project Mayday said what, less than 10%, 6-7% of Maydays are solved by the RIT team. So we need to focus on other operating crews' capabilities and how they're gonna react.
Yeah, exactly. Good.
More lessons learned. So it was a lot of stuff here. I appreciate you coming on. And what I usually do with this, when we talk about a Mayday Monday, we usually talk about a line of duty death. Obviously, we really didn't focus too much on that. We did talk about Jack Rose from New York and his incident. And I hope everybody goes out, looks at that, gets the available information on that, and learns about his sacrifice. But usually, I talk to people like Mike, right? Benedum came on, and I wanted him to give me 2 or 3 things from that incident. We didn't talk about a specific incident, but in your rabbit hole you've gone down, a couple, 2 or 3 things that you want the listeners that hopefully came on tonight to kind of take away from your investment in this, what you've done, and where you think it goes with that.
All right. I think first of all, kind of like we talked about, the basics can't always prevent every Mayday, right? Like sometimes there's stuff that happens that's far outside of anybody's control, that you could be the best firefighter in the world and it can still get you. But that solid foundation in the basics is going to make you far more effective at hopefully helping yourself get out of the situation if you find yourself in one, or helping somebody else through it. And I think like on our job, there's a lot of times where the squad might get tasked with a certain job on the fire ground that might not normally be squad work, but they know that to be on the squad, you're generally a pretty solid firefighter, and you've got a good foundation of the basics. You might not know every latest greatest Instagram trick on how to force a door with a teaspoon or something, but you just got a good solid foundation in the basics, and I think that just pays dividends when it comes to your own Mayday or responding to somebody else's. And then probably just like the big five allow you to focus again on that flexibility and rapid response, right? You can avoid the RIT picnic. You don't need the tarp. You don't need anything else. If you're getting out a tarp on a Stokes basket for a single family dwelling fire, you're getting too much stuff off the rig, right? For that simple versus complex Mayday. And then with staging, right? If we can basically conduct that continuous 360 as the RIT crew, it gives us a lot of options that will allow us to rapidly respond and allow us to be flexible. Just because the attack line or the search team went through the front door doesn't necessarily mean that we have to go through the front door as the RIT team. I mean, there's a lot of places I go and teach and talk to people, and they say the way they train or what their procedures are is even if they're at different points, everybody meets up front, they come up with a plan, and then they all go in together through the front door. Well, that's all well and good, but what if the guy's at a window in Division 2 in the rear, and you're already back there and you have a ladder? Like, I don't need to ask the principal for permission, right? Like, I can just throw a ladder or roll one from another window if there's not multiple back there, and if I can get to this guy a whole lot faster, it's only better for him. So I think those are really the things: the relying on the basics, your RIT staging, and giving you that flexibility and rapid response, and no more RIT picnics. Get rid of that.
Yeah, and I go back to kind of picking up on what you said about the basics and being good at those, right? I go back to the leadership under fire guys when they first kind of started. The big thing was make yourself hard to kill, and I think that resonates with that, right? If you're really good at the basics, again, it's going to make yourself hard to kill. I saw somebody said, when you're good at this job, it's easier. Well, it's also safer. Right? When you're really good at the basics, it becomes safer. The other thing you mentioned about the rapid RIT, right? So are you a proactive RIT guy, or does it depend when it gets into what they're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is the way that we operate. So on a house fire, you're getting 4 engines, a truck, a rescue squad, chief, safety officers, some ambulances. And so our truck is typically going to the roof. The rescue is typically going in and search. Our 4th due engine is RIT. And so that's something else that changed from Magnolia. Prior to Magnolia, the 3rd due engine in the running order was assigned RIT with the thought of, we need RIT, we need to get that established and ready to go in case something happens. After Magnolia, we realized that first of all, the more people you put in the building, hopefully the faster the fire goes out, but also the more people you load the building with, the greater the chances are that somebody stumbles upon this Mayday firefighter if something does happen. So that's why we bumped it back to 4th. And so by only having 1 truck company, and our trucks are staffed with 3, they're obviously not capable of splitting to an inside-outside team or a roof team and an OV team. So a lot of times RIT does have to perform some of the traditional OV type, proactive RIT, whatever you want to call it, type roles. With cutting window bars and throwing ladders and making second egress. So I'm a huge fan of it, because for better or for worse, on our job, it probably wouldn't happen if RIT wasn't doing it. A lot of it wouldn't get done in the first place. So I mean, I think it's huge. If RIT can't prevent it, it's almost like we're wishing for it to happen if you're not willing to stop it. So.
No, good stuff. We could talk all night on this stuff, I think, but for the December 2022 Mayday Monday, I could really appreciate you bailing me out. I had some plans, they kind of fell through, so I'm like, who can I reach out to? And I've been wanting to talk to you about it. So I reached out to a friend because I thought I had your number, and got Kelly Byrne, and
he knows everybody.
Yeah, and he gave me your number, and I'm sure enough, I'm like, oh, that's it. So this is good. I appreciate you coming on. You keep doing what you're doing. I know you're bummed to be out of operations, but there is a plan. There's a plan, I'm sure, for you, and you're going to do some good stuff in Toledo. They have a good one there in Jake Hoffman, and like I said, thank you for coming on. I hope you enjoy the rest of December, holidays, and that kind of stuff. And maybe we'll see you around in 2023.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks again for having me, Tony.
All right, everybody, Mayday Mondays 2022, this ends it for the 2022 Mayday Mondays. Please review these things, go back, and then come January, we'll talk about some New Year's resolutions and plan a good year for that. So thank you, Fire Engineering. Thank you, Peter, for producing this stuff. Chief Halton, we missed you again, but maybe we'll get you more back in 2023. Thank you all. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. Thank you.